The High Synod of the Galactic Concordat did not merely govern, it resonated. The architecture of the Grand Chamber was designed to amplify the weight of silence, a cavernous hollow carved from the heart of a dead moon, lined with acoustic dampeners made of nebulous crystal. Every breath taken by a representative was swallowed by the void above, ensuring that only words of absolute necessity were spoken, and when they were, they carried the gravity of law. Here, beneath the vaulted obsidian ceiling, the fate of 1,000 systems was currently hanging by the thinnest of threads, suspended in the thick, suffocating atmosphere of dread that had settled over the assembly like a funeral shroud. High Counselor Vral, a towering figure of chitin and bioluminescence representing the ancient Cathar hegemony, shifted his massive bulk, the sound of his armored plates grinding together echoing like tectonic plates shifting deep underground. His multifaceted eyes, usually glowing with the cool blue of logic, burned with a nervous, erratic amber. He looked down at the data stream hovering before him, a holographic projection of the outer rims that bled red with the indicators of lost contact. The silence of the chamber was not empty. It was heavy, pregnant with the unspoken realization that the Concordat, for all its millennia of peace and bureaucracy, was facing an extinction event it was utterly ill-equipped to handle. "The reports are confirmed." Vral's voice finally broke the stillness, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated in the chest cavities of every species present. "The Voidstalkers have breached the perimeter. The 7th sector is gone, not conquered, gone. The stars themselves have been dimmed." A ripple of unease moved through the chamber, a rustling of robes, feathers, and scales. The assembly was a kaleidoscope of the galaxy's finest minds and oldest bloodlines. The ethereal, gaseous scions of Nebula 9, the cybernetic collectives of the Machina Prime, the aquatic, leviathan diplomats of the Deep World Federation. All of them, masters of their domains, now looked small against the vastness of the threat Vral described. The Voidstalkers were a myth made manifest, a predatory swarm from the dark space between galaxies that consumed energy, matter, and life with equal indifference. And the Concordat, bloated on centuries of trade treaties and cultural exchanges, had forgotten how to fight. Their fleets were ceremonial, their weapons calibrated for policing piracy, not repelling a cosmic annihilation. "We have the blockade lines," interjected Counselor Thel of the Avian Ascendancy, her voice sharp and brittle, betraying her fear. "The automated defense grids, the treaty-bound militias." Vral turned his massive head slowly toward her, his mandibles clicking softly in a gesture of pity. "The defense grids lasted 12 standard minutes, Counselor, the militias. They ceased to exist before they could even transmit a distress signal. We are exposed. We are naked before the storm." The debate that followed was a chaotic spiraling of panic masked as deliberation. Accusations were flung regarding funding allocations, neglected maintenance of ancient fortress worlds, and the arrogance of believing peace was a permanent state of the universe. But beneath the noise, a singular, uncomfortable thought began to permeate the consciousness of the High Synod. It was a thought that had been suppressed for 50 cycles, buried under layers of legal jargon and diplomatic condescension. The human question. Humanity, the youngest species to be admitted to the Concordat, the erratic, short-lived, resource-hungry bipeds from the Sol system. They had been admitted on probation, their integration strictly controlled, their expansion capped, and most crucially, their military capabilities neutered. The Treaty of Sol, signed 5 decades ago, was explicit. Humanity was forbidden from constructing capital-class warships. They were allowed patrol craft for their own system and nothing more. The Concordat had feared the human propensity for rapid industrialization and their history of kinetic warfare. They had leashed the wolves to ensure the sheep could sleep soundly. Now, as the wolves of the void approached the door, the sheep were realizing the error of their pacifism. "We shackled them," Vral murmured, his voice low almost to himself, though the acoustics carried it to the farthest reaches of the hall. "We bound their hands and told them to build gardens while we watched the galaxy burn." "They are irrelevant," snapped a representative from the Machina Prime, a metallic construct of shifting geometric shapes. "Even if they had ignored the treaty, 50 cycles is insufficient to build a fleet capable of challenging the Voidstalkers. Humans are scavengers, engineers of the mundane. They build haulers, colony pods, atmosphere processors. They are the galaxy's laborers, not its saviors." Vral looked at the machine intelligence wit. A weary expression. "Laborers build the foundations upon which empires rest construct, and we have treated them as such, but we must ask ourselves, did they listen?" The question hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. It was the fear that every elder race harbored, that the primitive, aggressive humans had deceived them. That out in the dark, away from the prying sensors of the Concordat, The shipyards of Saul had been churning out dreadnoughts in violation of the highest law. If they had, the Concordat would have to beg for help from criminals. If they hadn't, the galaxy was doomed. "Summon them," Vral commanded, overriding the rising murmur of dissent. "Summon the Terran ambassador. Let us see what the children of Earth have to offer the dying gods." The arrival of the human delegation was not marked by the pomp and circumstance typical of the Synod. There were no fanfare trumpets, no energetic displays of psychic prowess. The massive blast doors of the chamber groaned open, and a single figure walked in, flanked by two assistants carrying heavy data slates. Ambassador Elias Thorne was an older human, his hair the color of iron filings, his face etched with the deep lines of a life spent navigating the treacherous currents of interstellar politics. He wore a simple utilitarian suit of charcoal gray, devoid of medals or sashes. He walked with a steady, measured gait, the click of his boots on the obsidian floor the only sound in the colossal hall. He did not look intimidated. He did not look arrogant. He looked tired. As he reached the center of the chamber, the floating podium ascended to meet him, and he placed his hands on the railing, looking up at the tiers of alien representatives staring down at him with a mixture of desperation and disdain. "High Counselors," Thorne began, his voice raspy but clear, amplified by the room's acoustics. "You summoned us. We are here." Vral leaned forward, his amber eyes narrowing. "Ambassador, you are aware of the situation in the 7th sector." It was not a question. "We are," Thorne replied simply. "The Void Stalkers. We have been tracking their trajectory for 6 months." A collective gasp went through the chamber. "6 months?" Thel screeched. "We only detected them 3 days ago. How could you know?" Thorne's expression didn't change. "We listened to the static, Counselor. You listened to the music. While the Concordats celebrated the Festival of Light, our deep-range telemetry outposts in the Kuiper Belt picked up the gravitational shearing. We knew they were coming." The accusation was implicit but devastating. The humans with their primitive tech had outsensed the Concordat because they were looking for threats, while the Concordat was looking for comfort. "If you knew," the Machina representative buzzed, "why did you not mobilize? Why did you not warn us?" Thorne looked at the machine with a cold, hard stare. "We filed 17 reports. They were all flagged as low-priority anomalies by your bureaucratic algorithms. As for mobilization, we are bound by the Treaty of Saul, are we not? Article 4, Section 9. No human vessel shall exceed the tonnage or armament classification of a Class C patrol cutter. We followed your rules." "Damn the rules," Vral roared, his patience shattering. "Our worlds are burning, Ambassador. The Void Stalkers do not care about treaties. We need ships. We need weapons. Tell us here and now, under the gaze of the ancestors, did you build them? Did you break the treaty?" The chamber held its breath. This was the moment of truth. If the humans said yes, they were criminals who might save the galaxy. If they said no, they were law-abiding corpses. Thorne paused, looking down at his hands for a long moment before raising his head. His eyes were unreadable. "No," he said softly. "We did not build warships. We did not build dreadnoughts. We honored the treaty. There is not a single vessel in the human fleet designed for combat." A wave of despair crashed over the assembly. Representatives slumped in their pods. The ambient light in the room seemed to dim. It was over. The humans were as helpless as the rest of them. "However," Thorne continued, his voice cutting through the rising tide of hopelessness like a razor, "we are humans. When you told us we couldn't build swords, we didn't stop forging. We just built bigger plows." He tapped the console on his podium, and a massive holographic projection sprang to life in the center of the chamber. It showed a live feed of the Sol system, specifically the orbital shipyards of Jupiter and Saturn. The image was breathtaking. The rings of Saturn were obscured by a lattice of scaffolding so vast it defied comprehension. Docked within these skeletal frames were ships. But ships was an insufficient word. These were artificial mountains, blunt, ugly utilitarian slabs of titanium and ceramic composite that dwarfed the largest Concordat cruiser by an order of magnitude. They bristled with engines the size of cities, and their hulls were thick enough to withstand planetary collisions. "Behold," Thorne said, his voice devoid of pride but heavy with purpose. "The Gaia class, the Hephaestus class, the Prometheus class. You forbade us from building warships, so we built infrastructure, high-capacity terraformers, asteroid crackers, deep void rescue and salvage mega-haulers." Vral stared at the hologram, his mind struggling to process the scale. "Ambassador, these are construction vehicles." Thorne nodded. "Technically, yes. The Gaia is an atmospheric reprocessor. It is designed to hover over a dead world and bombard it with kinetic isotope canisters to restart a molten core. It has a localized deflector shield strong enough to survive inside a star's corona for short durations, because that's where we harvest plasma." He pointed to another behemoth, a jagged nightmare of hydraulic claws and laser drills. The Hephaestus, an asteroid mining rig, its primary laser array is designed to slice through nickel-iron cores in seconds. Its tractor beams can tow a moon. He looked up at Vral, a faint, grim smile touching his lips. They have no missiles, they have no particle lances, they are not warships, they are tools, but if you need to break a rock or restart a planet or clear a path, they are very effective. The realization hit Vral like a physical blow. The humans had adhered to the letter of the law with malicious compliance. They hadn't built weapons of war. They had built industrial titans that operated on energy scales that made war look like a petty squabble. A laser that cuts a planet's core is a weapon, regardless of whether you call it a mining drill. A shield that survives a sun is armor, regardless of whether you call it safety gear. The Voidstalkers are entering the Sirius sector, Thorne stated, checking his data slate. That is a human trade route. We are deploying the fleet to clear the debris and stabilize the environment. We invite the Concordat observers to witness our civil engineering project. The hologram shifted, showing the massive ships disengaging from their docks. The sheer thrust generated by their engines caused a gravitational ripple that the sensors registered as a seismic event. They moved with the ponderous, unstoppable momentum of glaciers. "We are not soldiers," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like thunder. "We are builders, but sometimes to build a future you have to demolish the obstacles in your way." The scene shifted to the bridge of the UNS Atlas, the flagship of the heavy engineering fleet. It was a cavernous space, lacking the sleek aesthetic of a warship bridge. It looked more like a mission control center for a space program, filled with engineers in flight suits rather than officers in dress uniforms. Admiral, or rather, Chief of Operations, Sarah Vance stood overlooking the main view screen. She was a woman of sharp angles and grease-stained fingernails, a veteran of the orbital foundries. "Status," she barked, her voice rough. "All systems green, Chief," replied a sensor operator. "The Voidstalker swarm is intercepting us. Estimate 3 million biological entities. They are jamming comms and charging bioplasma weaponry." Vance nodded. "They think we're prey. They see big, slow targets." She tapped a command into her console. "Fleet-wide channel, listen up. This isn't a dogfight. We don't have the maneuverability to dance with these things. We are rocks. They are waves. Let them break against us. Engage industrial shielding. Power up the mining arrays. Set targets to debris classification." In the void of space, the human fleet did not form a battle line. They formed a wall, a solid, impenetrable wall of durasteel and ambition. The Voidstalkers, sleek, organic nightmares that moved like fluid darkness, swarmed toward them, firing lances of corrosive bioenergy. The beams struck the shields of the human ships and did nothing. The shields, designed to withstand the crushing gravity of gas giants and the inferno of solar flares, flared briefly and held. Inside the ships, the lights didn't even flicker. "Shield integrity at 99.8%, the operator reported. "They're scratching the paint." Vance watched the swarm dash itself against her ships. "All right, let's get to work. Target the center of the swarm, activate the mass driver catapults. Load with, let's go with Class 4 iron slugs." The mass drivers were designed to shoot packets of refined ore across solar systems to processing plants. They were not rapid-fire guns. They were cannons that fired 10-ton slugs at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The Atlas shuddered as the magnetic rails fired. Across the fleet, hundreds of other ships did the same. There were no explosions, no flashes of chemical fire, just physics. Sir Isaac Newton, the deadliest son of a bitch in space, took the wheel. The slugs slammed into the Voidstalker swarm with kinetic energy that rivaled tactical nuclear weapons. The organic ships didn't explode, they liquefied. The impact shockwaves propagated through the tight formation of the enemy, turning the vacuum into a blender of shrapnel and gore. "Debris field expanding," the operator said calmly. "Enemy cohesion breaking." Vance didn't smile. This wasn't glory, it was work. "Cycle the terraforming emitters. Switch to atmospheric sterilization mode. Let's burn the rest." The atmospheric processors, designed to scour bacteria from alien worlds to make them habitable for humans, unleashed waves of high-intensity radiation and chemical aerosols. It was a war crime if used on a sentient population. Against a non-sentient predatory swarm, it was pest control. The Voidstalkers shrieked in the radio spectrum as their biology unraveled at the cellular level. Back in the High Synod, the live feed played in stunned silence. The alien counselors watched as the harmless, human labor fleet dismantled the greatest threat the galaxy had ever seen with the dispassionate efficiency of a demolition crew. There were no heroics, no desperate last stands, just the cold, hard application of overwhelming industrial power. Vral watched, his mandibles slack. He realized then that the Concordat had fundamentally misunderstood humanity. They thought humans were aggressive because they fought wars. But humans fought wars to end them. They were not warriors at heart. They were engineers who viewed war as a breakage in the system, a malfunction to be corrected with the biggest wrench available. The warships the Concordat had banned were toys compared to the tools humans used to reshape reality. By banning the toys, they had forced the humans to weaponize the very building blocks of civilization. Target decimated. Vance's voice came through the audio link, crackling with static. Sector 7 is clear. We are deploying salvage drones to collect the biomass. It will make excellent fertilizer for the agri-worlds, requesting permission to proceed to Sector 8 for additional cleanup. Vral looked at Thorn, who was still standing at the podium, his hands clasped behind his back. The ambassador looked up, his expression solemn. The work is not done, High Counselors. There is much to rebuild. We are ready to assist, but we will need to renegotiate the terms of our membership, specifically the restrictions on our construction capabilities. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. The galaxy had changed. The hierarchy of power had been inverted not by a coup, but by a paradigm shift. The weeks that followed the Battle of Sirius were a blur of diplomatic upheaval. The Concordat was in shambles, its military credibility shattered, its political structure buckling under the weight of the realization that their safety had been an illusion. The humans, meanwhile, went back to work. The massive ships of the engineering corps moved from system to system, crushing the remaining splinter fleets of the Void Stalkers with the same bored efficiency. They didn't occupy worlds, they fixed them. They dropped orbital tethers to stabilize quaking tectonic plates, they filtered poisoned atmospheres, they rebuilt shattered cities with fleets of rapid-print drones. They conquered the galaxy by saving it, binding systems to them not with fear but with gratitude and unbreakable economic dependence. The game changer wasn't a weapon, it was a philosophy. The galaxy saw conflict as a contest of wills. Humans saw it as a logistical problem. In the quiet aftermath, Vral met with Thorn in a private observation lounge overlooking the reconstruction of the Concordat's capital, Ringworld. The stars outside were bright and steady, no longer dimmed by the shadow of the swarm. "You knew," Vral said, handing the human a glass of refined nectar. "You knew the treaty would force you to build something stronger than a warship." Thorn took the glass, swirling the liquid. "We suspected. Humanity has a history of creative interpretation. When you take away a man's sword, he picks up a rock. When you take away the rock, he uses his fists. When you bind his fists, he uses his mind. You tried to legislate us into harmlessness, Vral. But you forgot that the most dangerous thing about a human isn't what he holds in his hand. It's the fact that he refuses to accept the world as it is." "We feared your aggression," Vral admitted. "We thought if we kept you weak, you would be safe neighbors. We were fools." Thorn took a sip. "You didn't keep us weak, you focused us. If we had built warships, we would have built a fleet of destroyers, maybe a few thousand strong. We would have fought the Void Stalkers ship to ship, and we might have lost. But because you forced us to focus on industry, on survival, on infrastructure, we built a machine that can move stars. We didn't build a fleet to fight a war. We built a fleet to survive the end of the world, and that is why we won." Vral Lu kept out at the massive silhouette of the UNS Atlas parked in orbit, its running lights blinking in a slow, rhythmic heartbeat. It was ugly, blocky, and undeniably magnificent. "So," Vral asked, "what happens now? Do you rule us? The species with the biggest hammer usually leads." Thorn shook his head. "We don't want to rule. Ruling is inefficient. It requires bureaucracy, policing, suppression. We want to build. We want to go out there," he gestured to the deep black beyond the galactic rim, "and see what else is broken. The Void Stalkers came from somewhere. There's a source. A signal we found in the noise of their destruction." Vral stiffened. "A signal? Another invasion?" Thorn smiled, and for the first time it was a genuine smile filled with the terrifying, boundless curiosity that had carried his species from the caves to the stars. "No, not an invasion, a distress call. The Void Stalkers weren't an army, Vral. They were refugees. Something frightened them out of the dark, something bigger." The implication hung in the air, chilling the blood of the ancient Cathar. The humans had just crushed a galactic threat with mining equipment, and now they were looking for the thing that scared that threat. "And you intend to find it?" Vral whispered. "We have to," Thorn said, setting his glass down. "We're the maintenance crew. If the universe is breaking, it's our job to fix it. Besides," he added, a glint of steel in his eyes, "we have some new designs for the Olympus-class heavy lifters. If there's something out there big enough to scare the Void Stalkers, we're going to need a bigger wrench." The story of the Concordat ended that day, and the story of the Terran Union began. It was not an empire of conquest, but an empire of competence. The humans didn't bring peace, they brought solutions. And in a cold, indifferent universe, a solution was the most powerful weapon of all. The galaxy watched as the human fleets turned their engines toward the intergalactic void, their exhaust plumes painting streaks of light across the dark, heading toward the unknown not with fear, but with a tool belt and a plan. They were humans. They weren't allowed to build warships, so they built the future instead.